Okay, let's see if we can make this happen in here. I'm back in the greenhouse again. You can see the snow on the roof. I was going to say that this story is not exactly uplifting. And we've had a lot of gray weather. It is cold and it is snowing, and a lot of people have cabin fever. So if you're close to the edge, maybe you better back away and not listen to this story. But I think it's important for this story to be told because it's history. And if we don't know history, then we're going to repeat it, all right? And it's important to know our enemy, how they operate, what they do, and who they are. And without this story being told and retold, they're going to continue doing what they're doing. All right, I need to talk to you, Lorna. All right, so our story begins when I retired from the Air Force in 2004, as far as farming goes. We had fooled around with it a little bit before that at our last duty assignment, but I still had a full-time job, and, it was fun. But we found that, hey, this is profitable because we're not buying food from the store, and the food that we're creating is way better, and it's way funner, and the lifestyle of living on a farm is just what we wanted, for our life. In the military, it's completely different. It's very industrial, very precise, and all that stuff. And I didn't really want to do that for the next stage of my life. All right, I'm into it 16 years now here since I got out. I got out in 04. So in 11, Jill and I were delivering food to a restaurant that we had produced. It was one of our customers, longtime customer. And the chef said, hey, I just got a briefing at the college, Northern Michigan Culinary Institute. Just got a briefing there from the ag commissioner that your pigs are now illegal. I said, well, how could that be? And he says, well, they're feral. And nah, that can't be. They can't be feral. I mean, they're in pens at my house. They're on paddocks. They're behind fences. They can't be feral. And just from my high school education, I knew that a feral pig was a pig that was abandoned or had escaped and kind of returned to the wild. But these obviously haven't because they're here. We imported these ones from Austria. We learned a lot about these pigs and had a pretty good thing going with them. They're Mangalitsa. We were one of the first farms in the United States to bring them in to the United States, and we're definitely the first farm in Michigan to have them. And I still got them, so that's the end of the story. But so I made an inquiry the next day, and turns out we got this emailed to us by our senator. All right, take a screenshot of that. It's a lot of fun, but it's 4, 5, 6 pages here, and it's a bunch of legal jargon. And I'd never fooled around with this type of stuff before. I just started going through it, and holy smokes, the government has said that my pigs are illegal. And that's what I thought after reading this. It's from the Department of Natural Resources, and it's December 13th, 2011. So, we counseled with other people and decided that after a short period of time that we were just not going to do it. We just weren't going to do it because it seemed absolutely foolish what they did in the language that tips it off. And I'm going to tell you this because this gets used a lot by these tyrants, these communists. They gave a list of characteristics. There were 9 characteristics here. And you would think it was written by the staff of Saturday Night Live because they said any pig with a straight tail is illegal. Any pig with a curly tail is illegal. Any pig with a floppy ear, any pig with a curly, an erect ear, pigs that are brown, pigs that are black, pigs that are red and brown. Then they get really technical here they go into the under fur. They talk about the under fur. All pigs have two furs. They have the outer fur and the under fur. There's 126 breeds of pigs in the world, and but they're all pigs. If they do go feral, yeah, that's a bad thing, but that's not my problem. I don't have feral pigs. And then they got really cool here, skeletal appearance. It says sus scrofa skeletal structure is distinct, but they don't give any qualifiers on it, none at all. And so you read through this and you're just like, what, are these people all right? But they're all college educated people, I would imagine, and it was signed by the director of the Department of Natural Resources. The ninth characteristic is always my favorite. It's other characteristics not currently known to the Michigan Department of Natural Resources that are identified by the scientific community. Well, when I first read that, I bought it. The scientific community. I mean, I guess I believe in science. I'm kind of a scientific type guy. But as things progressed, and as we started to see their case absolutely fall apart, because of what we projected at them, their case started to fall apart. They didn't really have what they said. I mean, they're saying your pigs are illegal. Let's say that they say robbing banks is illegal. They're not gonna negotiate it. You rob a bank, they cuff and stuff you, that's it. But in this case, they wanted to negotiate. Your pigs are illegal. If you don't get rid of them, they actually said this to me, you'll be arrested. So they said that they would take my freedom from me if I didn't get rid of my property, because they came out with this declaratory ruling. This was just dreamed up by some bureaucrats, right? It wasn't a bill, it's got to be a bill, and then goes through the House, and then goes through the Senate, signed into law by the governor. It wasn't that. This is just some bureaucrats. This happens to be the Department of Natural Resources, and I really am harping on the Department of Agriculture, because the Department of Agriculture, we found out in depositions, were the ones that put the Department of Natural Resources up to it, because the Department of Ag knew that farmers are not going to take them seriously, when they come to you with a hairnet and a lab coat and a clipboard. Farmers just they don't like that type of thing. But in this state, the Department of Natural Resources, people are afraid of them. That's it. So they capitalized on that fear of the DNR. And people have a good reason to be fearful of them. They're not exactly, they don't exactly they play by their own rules. And I'm not going to go into that now. I think all you have to do is a little research on that, and there's a good reason to fear them, because you never know what's going to happen. I've heard horror stories from good friends of mine. Okay, but in this case, they put this out. They told me that I had to depopulate my animals, which means kill my animals, or I could sell them out of state. They're okay with that. And their reason was that there was this terrible outbreak of feral swine in the state of Michigan. They had numbers that we couldn't believe. They were saying there's 5,000 animals roaming the state, feral animals. And if half of them are females and they're bred and they have like 15 babies a year, wow, you do the math on that. In a year, there would be more animals in this state than there are people in the state, if it was true. We didn't think it was true. We'd lived here. We've spent plenty of time in the woods. I'd never seen a feral pig. I don't know anybody that's seen a feral pig. And as I traveled the state talking about this, I would always ask the crowd, who has seen a feral pig? Nobody, except for one gal, some old lady that worked for the Attorney General. She said that her Uncle Tony had seen one like back in '73. So I didn't really go with that, and then her husband tried to pick a fight with me after the thing, so I didn't really go with what they said. I have to throw that one out. All right? So I said I wasn't going to depopulate my animals. They said they'd arrest you. They said they would be here the morning of the 1st of April 2012. They didn't show. A bunch of my friends showed. They wanted to see the show. I wonder if that had something to do with it. You know, we like to talk about what works and what didn't work. Numbers of people that can think with their heads works, and that they're good. And there's not a lot of them down at the state capitol. Or at least if they do think with their head, they have to camouflage it in order to be part of the group of people who don't think with their heads. All right. So the next thing that they did, the Attorney General's office said that if we didn't comply, they were going to hit a $700,000 fine. Oh, by the way, did I mention when I get arrested, me and my wife get arrested, then they take our children and put them in state custody? And I talked a little about that with my lawyer, and I said, well, they could just go with my parents-in-law. No, the state can't take that risk. They got to make sure they're kept safe. So they're going to put them with somebody else. They'll break your children up. I got 8 kids. They'll break them all up, send them to different places for the expediency and safety of the children. Right. Okay, so then they threatened a big $700,000 fine. And what happened then was I shared that with the public, and the public went bananas. Here I am, just a small farmer. You know, I chose to farm after I got out of the U.S. military. I chose to farm. I didn't choose to manufacture drugs. I didn't choose to go into prostitution. I didn't choose to go into bank robbing. I could have. I could probably be good at those things. But I chose to go into the food business. You know, the life business as opposed to the death business. That was my choice. I thought I'd be left alone. Then this whole thing happens. So long story short, we sued them for clarification of their declaratory ruling. And when we did that, we gained the ability to get them in a court of law in front of God and country to explain straight tails, curly tails. And also to explain how is it that this American citizen his property because you friggin' say so without a law. How can you take this guy's stuff without a law? This stuff's done all the time, folks, all the time. But people don't come together on this, and that's what we're doing. We're coming together on this. That's why we're talking about this. Baker, where do you get the authority to talk about this? I went through it. That's how come I have the authority to talk about it. What authority do we have as U.S. citizens? It's in the Constitution of the United States. That's our authority. Okay, so the next thing that happened, this went on for years, all right? It went on till, it ended in 2014. In the meantime, you know, we went through three lawyers, and as I said at the conference, I would not say that lawyers work. They cost a lot of money, and they're into compromise, and I don't think that's what we need. The compromise was, you get to keep your pigs, but we don't have to pay you for all these expenses of legal expenses. And the lawyers struck that deal. Of course, the lawyers got to keep all the money, right? So I didn't think that was such a good deal, and I still don't think it's a good deal. Now, they can change. You know, lawyers could step up and say, you know what, we're going to do the right thing. But I have another installment of this because I actually did call a legal firm a couple of days ago that had said that they really like to sue the government and they'd really like to help. So I'll tell you about that in another one. But when we did come out of court, finally the state moved for what they call a dismissal because they knew that they were up against a really angry public and the U.S. Constitution, and they moved for a dismissal. The judge dismissed it here in Missaukee County, and I got to keep my pigs. Okay, so that's a good thing. Well, let me tell you, all right, this is why I have such a hard time with Department of Agriculture. They are connected with the Department of Natural Resources. Their employees swap all the time. They do a lot of work together. All the departments do. I should tell you that. Maybe not the state police. I don't know. As I've said, the state police have always been pretty good, and since I was a little kid, I had a lot of respect for them, and it's still there. they have not abused me, and I think that they could be the ones that rise above this actually and say, enough of this. We're not going to be used as hired guns for you, amateurs here. These people, the Department of Ag people, are amateurs. All right, they party in college for 4 years on their parents' dime, and they need a job, and they're the bottom of the class, and they go to work for the state. That's the way it is. They're not producers. If you're not a producer, you're a parasite, and that's what they are. They don't make anything. They just parasite off of tax money that I produce, that is forcefully taken from me, and so they use my resources against me. Is what is happening here, and it's a sad state of affairs. It's got to stop. It's just got to stop, and that's why I'm willing to do this. Right? This is not going to benefit me in any way to do this. Not at all. I mean, it actually benefits, my country people here, my countrymen. So that's why I do it. Those of us, I'm U.S. military, and a lot of my friends are U.S. military. Those of us that took oaths to protect and defend our Constitution, we have a duty to do this. So when you have that little fear thing happening in you, and you don't know if you should hit the share button, you have a duty to hit the share button, because the First Amendment is in place so we can disseminate information when tyrants pick people out and abuse them, and they like to do it quietly, all right, to get their way. That's what they like to do. So it's on us to broadcast this. This is what these organizations do to people. We pay them, Department of Ag, we pay them a lot of money. Their budget is huge. They have a ton of employees. My question, I live here. I shop here. I drive here. What benefit do I get from all that money and all of those people employed with the Department of Ag? Somebody tell me. Safe food? I don't think so. All the outbreaks come from who they oversee. All the outbreaks and all the deaths, that comes from them, not from small farms. If you are going to want clean food, if you're going to want nutrient-dense food, you're going to have to go to the farm to get it. You're not going to get it in restaurants, and you're not going to get it in stores, because restaurants and stores have a contract with the Department of Ag that they can't do business with people like me that produce good food. All right? So you're going to have to go to the farm. And if you're wondering why you're sick and you don't feel well and you don't look right, it's because what you're eating. And that's the problem I have with them, is they promote unhealth through poor quality food. Their standards could be that the food has to be nutrient dense. They don't care about that. They talk about food safety all the time, but allowing to go on the shelf, or that's the only food that's available to go on the shelf, that's on them. That's not on the store people, and that's not on the producers. The producers are being driven down out of sight by them, right? All right, so the end of the story was the declaratory ruling was dropped. We got to keep our pigs, but then what the Department of Agriculture did, they went to my customers, and keep in mind that people are scared. Only 4 of them came to me and told me what was going on. But I'll just give you a couple of examples. I had a store north here. I did a lot of business with them. They were good friends. That's how I was feeding my family. This isn't like a hobby. This is how I'm feeding my family. The Department of Agriculture went to that store, 2 cars, 3 people. They went in, they opened up their laptops, opened up their briefcases on his lunch counter at about 11:30, and then they took everything out of his freezer that said Baker's Green Acres on it, and they cataloged every piece very slowly. And this went on until like 2 o'clock in the afternoon. So his customers that would normally come in and get sandwiches at lunch didn't. And when you get black sedans sitting out in front of an establishment that says Department of Ag on the side, people automatically think, uh-oh, what did he do? And it scares people, right? They don't have to use black sedans. They don't have to have their logo on the side. They could just be company cars, right? But no. They like that intimidation process. And he was like, what's going on here? You know, they interrupted his business, and he lost customers over it. And he was like, Mark, I just can't do this. I can't have them coming in here. They did it a couple of times. And then I had another store over out by the coast that they done the same thing to. And people get really worried about that. And that was a tactic that they used. There was never any input back to me. Then what they did was, in order to run my butcher shop and butcher stuff in there and get it into stores, I have to be a food establishment. They didn't send us our license for the year. Now, we'd had a license with them for 14 years at the time. And one year they just didn't send it. So my wife contacted them and they said, well, you didn't send us a check. My wife was like, I got the canceled check right here. And they said, well, we'll be in touch. So I called down there, and I'm not talking to one of their pukes. I'm the CEO of this company. I want to talk to somebody that's a little higher up the food chain. I got a guy on the phone. He was like third from the top being the director right under the governor. Guy was totally unprofessional. Didn't know what was going on. And I said, you know, you should know what your people in the field, how they're abusing these citizens. We have businesses to run. We don't have time for this. Totally unprofessional. Finally, they did come and give us our license. And then they started this business of, oh, well, we've got to come and inspect you. Now, I've had this license for 14 years. They've never inspected. They inspected me the first time. That's what a joke it is. They don't provide oversight. They just come, make sure that you have, you know, screens on the windows and stuff like that. You know, washable walls, just the rudimentary stuff that you would do anyway. I mean, I'm not going to operate with the windows open and no screens because I'd get eaten alive, but it's just very rudimentary things. And then they give you permission to do it. And every year you have to pay them money. If you don't pay them money, you don't have permission. So it's kind of like a racket. There's no oversight. There's no safety involved at all. I mean, I think the only time they ever said anything to me when somebody else was qualifying in my shop, literally the fat lady with the clipboard and the hairnet said that she didn't like that chair that we had because it had been painted purple, and then it got discolored over the years, and it did look gross, but it was just a chair it was a stool that people would sit on when they were doing paperwork. She didn't like that, and she wanted us to send her a picture when we had removed it, believe it or not. So we did, and whatever, it was over, but we had a business to run. But then they wouldn't issue us our license. They wouldn't. And so that was about the point. No, wait a minute, I back up. They did issue the license finally, and I realized that with this license, with this permission, comes strings. I got to answer to them, and they said we can do a no-notice inspection anytime we want. Well, let's turn that around a little bit, all right? I didn't have anything to do with this contract. I just wanted a license, right? What if I had negotiated that license that, you know, okay, you can do a no-notice on me, no-notice inspection, but let's say that I suspect that your offices are stealing money. Let's say your offices are wasting time. How about I inspect you? How about I walk in your offices with a couple of armed guys to inspect your offices? It doesn't seem so right anymore, does it? But yet, they can do that to me. I don't know. So we finally said, keep your license, we don't want it. And we didn't reapply for it. And that's what I'm telling you. This is what worked. I have no licenses right now. So I have no agreement with this organization, this corporation known as the Department of Agriculture. So they have no authority. They're a corporation. That's it. They're like a contractor that works for the military. They are a contractor. And they have no authority if I have no agreement with them. Okay, now if I'm wrong, you know, I know they watch this stuff like hawks. If I'm wrong, they'll be on me like stink on you know what. let's see. I've been doing it now for a couple of years. Haven't heard hide nor hair of them. I kind of miss them. Maybe you should stop by. I got to go because my phone's getting cold. And I'll give you another installment tomorrow. But that's our story. A lot of heartache around here over it. Lost the business over it. It's just you're in fighting mode. We're here to just live quietly. And we would have lived quietly and left everybody alone. But it's too late now. I can't imagine this happening to another family. And if I have anything to do about it, it's not going to. So, it's Mark Baker's Green Acres. Remember, anyone can farm.